Hello, welcome to this presentation about this cloud-based modeling environment named Sirius Web. So I'm Etienne Juliot. I'm work for Obeo. We are doing visual tools for different domain in different industry, and we work with open modeling solutions to provide to user a way to define their engineering data. We are deeply involved with Eclipse and Eclipse Foundations for years and even decade now. We are involved inside several projects such as Capella, Axeleo, Sirius, and Eclipse Modeling in general. And we provide software in an open core business model and also services. Our DNA is to provide modeling tools with custom visual representations to make the tool as easy as possible for end users, and to rely on structured data to provide automations, computations on structured data. We are working on different domains. Some of them are system engineering, enterprise architecture, IT cartography, or IT development, which are using graphical domains between stakeholders, between functional people, IT people, and so on. We are working for years now to migrate our existing stack inside Sirius to the web. The goal of this is to use very modern architectures and modern experience. So we don't just add a web layer on the top of a desktop-based technology, but we create a fresh new technology, which is cloud native, with technology such as JavaScript, Spring, and others. And the goal is to provide a seamless deployment experience, both for the end user, with just a URL inside their web browser they can access to the diagrams, but also to the toolsmith to ease the deployment of their modeling tools. Sirius is already a long story, which has been created, which has started in 2013 at eclipse.org, and now it is widely used worldwide by plenty of users, plenty of software editors, plenty of big players in the industry. And you can find on the web different use cases and different talk about Sirius. The principle in a nutshell is to provide a low-code approach dedicated to the making of graphical editors. So first, you can define your own domain language with dedicated models there. You can also define and configure the editors, the look and feel, the toolings in a way where you don't have to code these behaviors. These two parts are made by the toolsmith, and the Sirius engine interpret these two files to render for the end users the final graphical editors. So you have different kind of representations. Diagrams is one of them. You can also have tables, forms-based editors, and so on. On the website of Sirius, you can find lots of different use cases. Feel free to contribute yours if you have one of them, and we will add them to the list. And feel free also to look at them to find inspirations for your own needs and your own context. Sirius also is worldwide used. One proof is the diversity at SiriusCon, where you have people from everywhere in the world which join this event and which contribute talk or feedbacks. So now let's focus on Sirius Web. So Sirius Web is using the Sirius principle. So it's graphical and domain specific. It is still defined by configurations to ease the customization of the workbench. But this time it is deployed on a web server with cloud technology. And it is rendered in a web browser with native technologies such as SVG, so you can benefit of the GPU power, and so you can have something which is very modern at the end. So here it is. As you can see, the look and feel is very nice because it is based on vectors, based on SVG. So you have a perfect rendering of any image, any labels. You can see also that we decide to use a palette directly contextual to any element. So we avoid to the user to be polluted by too long list of elements which are not relevant to the context of what he is creating. So here I can just create elements which are relevant to a team, relations which are relevant to a team. And also we decide to put on the right side the property sheet because everybody now have a wide screen, and it makes sense to move on the side of your screens this property window, so you have larger space to work on. So in this example, I have a company with teams, with employees, and I will create a new team. Here I click somewhere in my company. I can select that I want a new team. I can modify the name of this team in the property or directly inside this element. We say it is Sales North America. I can move it here. I can add a new relations between this team and this other one. Okay. I can add here a new member to this team. Another one. Okay, you can see that there are animation everywhere to make it more cool to use. And I can also have conditional style, for example, to say that when the leader of a team is set, it is now bold and underlying. We have also built in some validations result to explain to the user that each team needs to have a leader. So you have also different way of working with a layout. You can have diagrams which are fully auto-layouted. You can have handmade layout diagrams. And in this context, Sirius Web is smart to give you some assistance. When I move an element, you can see that the other one has moved to create some space between them. So it's very, very convenient to help you to make some very nice diagrams. You have also auto layout, capability to share the URL to somebody else, to put this URL in a Slack, in a Jira, in everything you want. So it's very easy to embed, to share any part of your workbench to anybody else. So as we saw, there are lots of different features with list container, which is a new feature of this year. You can set your own image, of course. You can have dynamic style, auto layouting. You have direct edit. You have a contextual palette, and you have your property views. Now with Sirius Web, you can also define your own language and your own studio. So for doing this, everything is inside the web. You can define your domain model, which is basically your language, directly in your browser. You can then describe the editors, how it should look like, which color to use, how to go from one concept to another one, thanks to images. And you have the result, which is live in your element. Something very cool to compare to classical Sirius desktop approach is that you don't have to manage the packaging. You don't have to package with Maven and Tycho and other technical stuff, your models. Everything is integrated in a fluent experience. As well, for deploying the result of your diagrams to the end user, you don't have to deploy your library by hand on a server. It is directly integrated in the experience to put it in a full web experiences. Sirius Web is based on our architecture, which is extensible and which is based on modules. So you can contribute your own extensions and reuse Sirius Web components. On the right side, you can see an example of this. It is Blockly. It is the same spirit than Scratch, tools for kids to learn programming, where each element act as a glue between each others, so you can define some workflows. We integrate this existing rendering approach directly inside Sirius Web, and we fill the gap between this pure graphical widget to the way that the models are exposed by the Sirius Web backend and the protocol between the client and the backend. And so that's the way you can contribute new representations. You can also create your own layout, create some specific backend services, leverage some webhooks to manage integrations, and create integration with other apps. And we'll come back on this later. All of this is integrated inside general platforms named Obeo Cloud Platforms. So you have Sirius Web as a central piece of these architectures. Sirius Web is based on reusable components. And on the top of Sirius Web, you have Obeo Studio, which is an enterprise-ready solutions which provide exclusive features for team working, to also manage authorization and other features. And so the goal is that you can create your modeling workbench on the top of Obeo Studio. You can also create your specific integrations if you already have a web apps and you don't want to be forced to use an existing portal and UX. And on the top of Sirius component, we have another component, another product named Obeo Publication, which enable requirement traceability with ALMs and requirement management systems. Obeo Studio, the main feature are focused on the collaborative approach. So you have user team management with LDAP support, with authorizations. You can select if your project is private, public. You can give a different level of access to your team, to specific users. And you can also have an indicator inside your editors who is modifying what in your models. And so you can have an experience similar to what you have with Google Docs, with Office Online, and other tools which enable such live collaborations. Obeo Studio will provide also webhook to provide integrations with external systems. Let's take an example of Zapier, which is an external system already available. You can here register a hook trigger by Obeo Cloud Platforms for any modification of one of your diagrams. Then you can say that these diagrams, but also the semantic content will be sent to Slack, to a specific channel. You can also send a specific email with another part of this message and update cards to track your element directly into Trello. The goal of this is to let you imagine different kind of workflow of integrations with existing technology. Zapier is just one of them. You have GitHub, you have some business process engines which already support webhooks. And you can create your own engine to be able to react to webhooks. We will provide also the Lifecycle support inside Obeo Studio. So you will be able to publish new domain models as well as new editors. So when you do this, you will decide when this editors becoming the new one. And you can also provide some history feature, which are quite complex because when you want to come back on a version before, of course, you need to come back on a new instance version, but also to be able to have in the corresponding domain models and the corresponding editor definitions to be sure to have something which is consistent. And when you are doing this, we provide something which is a long request for the user to manage the migrations of the domain models. So let's take an example of models, simple model from V1 to V2. I will just add a new attribute, isMan. In these situations, the migrations is just transparent because you add something to your meta models. But the other example is more tricky because the name of a person is now split in two parts. So the toolsmith will just have to use the interpreted rules mechanical of Obeo Studio to define how this name have to be split in two different attributes. And you don't have to code this on the backend. It is still just configurations. And when he creates this directly in the studio, you can decide to migrate the instance to go to the V2 versions. Then you can imagine to have more complex transformations, such as the creation of new concept based on other rules. You will still define your own rules expressions, and we will migrate your end user to these new versions. All of this enable new use cases. First, for the new user we will target is to provide fast adoptions thanks to your browser. You don't have anything to install to access to the data. With just one click, you can edit. So you can really spread the word to everybody in your enterprise. You have a web UX, so we can create some new fancy representation and rendering of your data. You can also have a fast executions thanks to a new architecture. So, with our RCP-based solutions, you have lots of different layers which have been built on the top of each other's. Thanks to this new stack, we simplify these architectures to be more modern and easier to maintain and more efficient. And also, we can have a fast scaling up thanks to cloud-based hosting, cloud-based technology, also for on-premise deployment. Everything is centralized on one centralized database, and so the security is easier to manage. Another use cases which benefit of this is that the end user themselves can contribute their own views. So the main story should be to let a toolsmith to create domain models, create a standard editors specifications to everybody to inside your company or your targeted end user community. And then you have the standard graphical editors. But the end user, or let's say some advanced end user, can create some customizations on the top of your existing engineering workbenches. So let's take an example. I will reuse the same domain models. I don't change the data structures, but I will just create a new layer here to be able to show my employees by locations and add teams on the left side and right side of each locations. Let's take an example. So on the right side, I have the definition of my diagrams, extensions, and I want to create a new object, not descriptions, and I'll say that it will be for each team. I will name it each team, and here is how I can query the list of the teams. As soon as I modify, I just have to go here to refresh, and I can already see that I have my team which are available here. This time I will change the look and feel to use an existing SVG image. Come back here, refresh. Here it is. And I will add a new edges between the office to the team. So I just have to say that these edges come from my team to the office. And I have something a little complex to explain that I want an edges for any employees which have which is part of this office. Again, I don't have any link between an office to an element. Okay. Our goal is to be able to provide to engineers which don't have specific development skills, the capability to be autonomous to create their own studio for doing their jobs. And so we need to be as simple as possible for them. In terms of integrations, going to the web provide some new experience which are very cool. As a end user, you can have one source of truth of your data centralized in the database, but usable in different front ends. And each of these front ends can be embedded directly inside the existing apps. So you don't break the ergonomics and you improve the acceptance to the end user by providing diagrammings, models directly inside their day-to-day tools. As a software provider, you benefit also of Sirius Web by having something more visual. So it's more attractive than just form-based editors or tables. While you keep the control of the UX and the storage of your data. There is an example of this with TIA and VS Code. There is a dedicated talk at EclipseCon, sorry, about this. And you can see that we are using the same ergonomics as usual in Visual Studio Code, but here, directly embed in the existing ergonomics, you have the diagrams. But you can imagine others integrations. So here are some mockups with Tuleap for the ALM. You can have all your tickets, all your project management, and directly inside this, a workflow, a dashboard, which are visual and which you provide from Sirius Web. You can imagine to have the same directly inside your wiki. So of course, it could be something read-only, but it could be also something you can edit directly. You can have this in your EDM, Alfresco, and others. You can have it in your CRM, in your SAP, in your others. So you can imagine lots of integrations with other portals which enable such integration, of course. Here is an interesting one with Jupyterlab, where you can imagine to modify directly with Jupyter some of your calculations, parameters, and have the rendering directly embedded inside your pages. And here is an existing integrations we created for Smarty 7. Smarty is tools for enterprise architectures and IT cartography. So it's a tools built on RCP and Sirius Desktop, as you can see, where you can define capabilities, governance, your process, the allocation of some applications to your IT, and also here is the flow between applications. And we will take an example of the corresponding. On the right side, you are on the top of Sirius Desktop, and on the left side, you have the fresh new front end of Smarty, where you can define directly in the web some your cartography. So I drag and drop some element on the left side, so I can resize them, move them to have something which is easy to read, and all the data are consistent between the two worlds. Thanks to Sirius Web, I can modify any part, any attribute of my models directly from my browser, and I can also see the result of any modifications on my desktop-based application. Look here, you will see that this element has been renamed directly on the web. And on the web, you don't have any save actions. Everything is in live, and so we succeed to be able to fluently manage the two elements. You can also create new elements. In this example, I allocate my application to a VMware node. Now let's go on the Sirius Desktop world, and I modify my element. Here there is a strategy of lock systems. So until I save, everything is locked, and you can see that it is reflect on the web part with a red rectangle around any element. Then you can also have synchronization between your models and form-based editors, thanks to auto-refresh element. So it's very cool, very simple to use at the end, and it's proof that you can embed Sirius Desktop fluently in existing applications. How you can create this kind of workbenches? So it's a four-step approach. First, you can discover Sirius, so you can try now demo platforms on Obeo Cloud Platforms to try to use existing sample editors. You can also start to create your own domain models and view, so it could help you to mock up what you expect at the end. We provide lots of free materials as documentation, as videos, and you can, thanks to all of this, you can prepare a scope definition of what should be the first iteration of your studio. So you can define a subset of your language, of your domains, mock up the graphical rendering you expect, and define what are the technical risks you want to unlock. Then you can enter a proof of concept phases. Usually it's between 5 to 15 days. And the goal is that we implement a subset of your domains, we create editors, we implement also a few complex behaviors, and we validate your specific requirement. It could be performance, it could be integration, it could be ergonomics, and it could be new concept to work with. At the end of this step, the goal is that you will have something credible enough to present it to your targeted end user and to have their agreement that it is the good user experience they expect to have. And it will also help you to define the exact scope you want for your first versions, which will be targeted inside the pilot phases. These pilot phases go to the productions. It doesn't aim to target 100% of all the future you could imagine, but the minimal ones. And for doing this, we work by incremental sprint. Thanks to the Sirius Web approach, you can have some regular results which are very visual. And so every week, you can see the result of the ongoing works. And there is a specific step here to extend Sirius Web core when it is required. The goal is to work in open innovation mode to avoid you to create specific extensions and to contribute back to the core to benefit, to let it benefit to all the community, but also to be part of the normal maintenance of the technology. So the focus on this is to rely on open innovation mode and to work step by step to decrease the risk. We first identify new generic feature. We can list based on your specifications what is not yet supported, and we identify the receptacle if it's target the Sirius core or if it's specific to you. We made this kind of example with, for example, the new table definitions required by for customers, and we define that it should be interesting for any end user of Sirius. So the second step was to work in the core of Sirius by creating a new API, extending the backend, which is Java-based, and working on the front end. On the front end, we try to reuse existing React and JavaScript widgets, or create new one when it is required, and to fill the gap between this existing widget or new ones to the protocol of communication between the client and the server, which is JSON-based and WebSocket-based. And we hard code a sample based on your expectations. At this point, there are two solutions. First one, if you already use this example, for example, this table only one time, perhaps the hardcore versions will be enough for your needs. But if you need plenty of different usage of this new representation, this new feature, it could make sense to go one step beyond by enable the exposure of this new capability to the configuration models. So in this way, we extend the configuration models. We add some new properties for the end users, for the toolsmiths, and we contribute it to the Sirius core or as specific extensions depending of the context. And so you can after ease the application on your DSL by just configure in the right way your view models to apply to your language and to apply to the multiple editors you aims to deliver to your end users. And the result could be hosted on a private instance on the web or as an on-premised way to deploy in-houses. When all this pilot is over and it is deployed and it's a success, there is a last step to industrialize the result with continuous integrations, performance tests, and support, and also the subscriptions with Obeo Studio to benefits of collaborations, authoring, and lifecycle management. In conclusions, you can see that Sirius Web is quite an active project. This year is a very important year because now the meta modeling in the web is ready to use. You can start to use it. We continue to improve this experience, to add new features, to expose all the features of the underlying frameworks to these configurators. And feel free to contact us if you want to make a proof of concept and if you need any questions. So thank you.